St. Bernard rescue dogs carried brandy. St. Bernard dogs come from the Great St. Bernard Hospice, a care center and hospice settled in the Swiss Alps. The monks who lived at St. Bernard's bred the eponymous dogs to seek and assist travelers in need of rescue in the mountain pass. St. Bernards are strong, stocky, long haired, and have an excellent sense of smell. These make for ideal traits for a search and rescue animal. As we learned previously, alcohol does not warm the body up. In fact, it does the opposite. Giving alcohol to somebody exposed to the cold is like bloodletting. It's almost always the worst thing you can do. Bonus true fact, bloodletting is a valid treatment for hemochromatosis, which is iron poisoning, and polycythemia, which is a condition where you have too many red blood cells. Perhaps the idea was that brandy acts like a shot of adrenaline, but there's no logic to that claim either. The myth of St. Bernard's carrying brandy first appears in The Percy Anecdotes, published in 1826. This was a 20-volume series of tales written by Thomas Byerley, a British journalist. Byerley wrote of Barry, the most legendary of all the rescue dogs from Great St. Bernard. Byerley reported that after Barry died, he was mounted and the little phial in which he carried a reviving liquor for the distressed travelers whom he found among the mountains is still suspended from his neck. In 1821, a painting of two St. Bernard dogs aiding a traveler trapped in the snow depicts one dog with a barrel on its collar. However, there is no depiction of the traveler drinking from the barrel or clues to suggest what is contained in the barrel. The Salem Witch Trials. The Salem Witch Trials were a series of hearings and sentencings of various people accused of witchcraft. Many misconceptions about the nature of the trial exists. So many people have heard of the Salem Witch Trials, and the name recognition artificially inflates its significance. Surprising fact number 1. The trials lasted only 15 months, from February 1692 to May 1693. Compare that to the Spanish Inquisition, which lasted 356 years. Nobody expected the Spanish Inquisition to last that long. Surprising fact number 2, not that many people were found guilty. Over 200 individuals were accused, but only 30 were convicted and 19 were executed. One of the more depressing elements of the accusations is that many appear to have been predicated on nothing but mental disorders or medical events. Persons suffering from mood disorders or those with epilepsy were stigmatized and assumed to be possessed or conjuring up evil. Mass hysteria causes people to see things they're paranoid of in everything. Witchcraft was blamed for everything from kidney stones to sudden deaths, which in colonial America were shockingly high to begin with, making the connection between witchcraft and sudden death a spurious correlation. Surprising fact number 3, it was not only women who were accused and convicted. Although a witch is a female, witchcraft is just any form of sorcery in which anybody can participate. So the actual crime is sorcery. 4 men were executed in the trials, and 1 man was tortured to death without a trial. More on him later. 2 dogs were even executed. Bonus fact that isn't true, the claim that witchcraft and sorcery are real. They are not real. Surprising fact number 4, nobody was burned to death. The people put to death by the trial were hanged. That is, except for Giles Corey. Corey is the one who never actually had a trial. Corey's wife, Martha, was convicted of witchcraft. At first, Corey testified against his wife, but he later tried to recant. This only made people suspicious that he was guilty of sorcery. Corey was thrown in jail with his wife and refused a trial because he knew there was no hope. He demanded that the state get on with it and execute him. Giles Corey was executed in a way that nobody else in the history of colonial America or the United States ever has. He was crushed to death between 2 stone slabs. It's confusing as to why this was done, considering it was illegal for the state to execute somebody in this way. In any case, over a period of 4 days, weight was incrementally added to the stone slab over his body. His final words, allegedly, were, "More weight." Oh, did I mention he was 80 years old at the time? Martha was hanged 3 days later. Pythagoras invented the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is the mathematical fact that the square of the hypotenuse of any right triangle is equal to the sum of the square of its other two sides. However, Pythagoras was not the first person to discover the Pythagorean theorem. The ancient Babylonians knew about it around 1,000 years before Pythagoras. It's unclear if the Greeks knew about the Babylonians' discovery, so they may have independently discovered it. Still, if that's the case, we have no evidence that Pythagoras himself discovered it. Pythagoras left behind no writings. We only know of him through secondary sources. Many sources write about the Pythagoreans, not strictly Pythagoras. In ancient times, a philosopher who could amass a following might open a school. Plato had the Academy, Aristotle had the Lyceum, and Pythagoras had his own. But what Pythagoras built was not so much a school as it was a church. You see, being a Pythagorean meant you were a member of a cult. Yes, Pythagoras was a cult leader. Not only did he have his own wild ideas, but those who followed him believed he had special powers, such as the ability to talk to animals. This isn't to say that Pythagoras wasn't also a mathematician, but mathematics was secondary to him and his following. The root of Pythagoreanism was the idea that humans have a soul that was trapped in a potentially endless cycle of reincarnation. The only way to escape the cycle was to live a life free of what we today would call sin. All religions and cults have taboos, forbidden or restricted social customs. The taboos of Pythagoreanism were meant to guide a person's soul to an afterlife with the gods, rather than being reincarnated as another human or animal. Pythagoreans were vegetarian. Pythagoreans believed that animals can suffer, and to kill an animal just to eat it was cruel since a person could subsist on a vegetarian diet. Causing this unnecessary suffering violated their sense of justice. And yet, they practiced animal sacrifice. Go figure. Not only were you forbidden from eating meat, but you were also forbidden from touching white roosters. It's unclear why white roosters were sacred, but they were strictly off limits. Pythagoreans were also not allowed to eat beans. There are numerous theories as to why. One posits that beans cause flatulence, which takes away the breath of life. Whether this means beans cause you to fart away part of your soul or something else is up for you to decide. A different account claims that Pythagoras thought sprouting beans resembled a human fetus, meaning harming a bean would be akin to harming a human. Aristotle wrote that Pythagoreans avoided beans because they are like the genitals, or because they are like the gates of Hades, as being alone unjointed, or because they are injurious, or because they are like the form of the universe, or because they belong to oligarchy, since they are used in election by lot. Your guess as to what any of that means is as good as mine. There were many other rules: no traveling on public roads, no entering the sacrificial space without shoes. If you joined the cult, you were forbidden from talking for 5 years. Always put your right shoe on first, and no wearing images of the gods on your finger. Like the mystery of the beans, the specific point of each rule is lost to us. Pythagoreans were also committed to living a life of austerity, which is one of strict plainness and simplicity. Despite all their silly beliefs, the Pythagoreans made lasting contributions to mathematics. Although they were not the first to discover the Pythagorean theorem, their knowledge of it was passed down. Knowledge that dies with its discoverer does not change the world. For example, without the invention of calculus, the Industrial Revolution would not have advanced beyond steam engines and cotton gins. Leibniz and Newton are credited with creating calculus, but Archimedes appears to have stumbled upon it nearly 2,000 years earlier. Sometime in the 13th century, a Christian scribe took a piece of parchment, scraped all the text off it, rotated it 90 degrees, and then wrote some prayers on it. This was a common practice due to how expensive parchment was. Advanced imaging techniques later revealed the scribe had scraped off two lost works of Archimedes, called the Ostomachion and the Method of Mechanical Theorems. Had these works been known about and expanded upon centuries earlier, the Industrial Revolution may have begun centuries earlier. The Pythagorean theorem is not just useful for triangles, it can help solve innumerable problems. While Pythagoreans, and ancient Greeks in general, obsessed over geometry, the Pythagorean theorem was foundational in developing trigonometry. The Pythagorean theorem has many uses in physics, especially when solving problems containing vectors that collide at right angles. A web page I found has 122 mathematical proofs on it, all solved using the Pythagorean theorem, one of which was discovered by former President James A. Garfield. Pythagoreans also contributed to music theory, particularly in understanding the mathematical relationship between different musical notes. This offered a new perspective on the harmony and dissonance in musical intervals. Pythagoreans discovered that having a string's length produces the same note an octave higher. They also discovered the mathematical relationship between the third and the fifth, which are relationships between different pitches. All that being said, their mathematics did not escape their mystical mindset. In fact, it was an integral part of it. Pythagoreans worshipped certain sacred numbers and said prayers to them. They were particularly fond of 1, 7, 8, and 10. In fact, when Pythagoreans discovered a new theorem, they made sacrifices to the number 10. They held that numbers contained all meaning to everything in the universe. You can argue that any information can be expressed as some integer, in which case the Pythagoreans may be correct. Then the question becomes, are numbers real? Pythagoreans thought they were. I'm not qualified to make an argument, but this is also not supposed to be a book of opinions, so decide for yourself.